Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and I am so excited to be here with you today. I'm recording this on my Monday morning, which is everyone else's Wednesday morning in the world. But it's exciting for me to get my week started with you and with a new podcast episode. So here we go. What I want to talk to you today about is how the skillfulness of mindfulness, or I should say, the skillfulness that mindfulness practices promote and cultivate for us, right, is a skillfulness of experience. Now, what do I mean by that? I don't even know what I mean by that. So let's work it out together. what I came to think over the last couple of days as I was sketching out what I'm going to talk to you about today in this podcast and YouTube. Is that my life, as I remember before I, practiced mindfulness, and I tell people this all the time, and I'm sure I've told you this all the time or several times, as I look back on who I was before I had these skills and before I knew how to practice mindfulness, I can't even imagine what it felt like to be me. I cannot imagine what I looked like to other people. I can't even imagine how I was living the way I was. It's that different. It's that profoundly different now than it was, say, I'll just throw out 10 years, ago. And so one of the most important ways in which that, yes, there's a lot that's gone on in terms of the kindness that I understand now, and the skill of kindness and the skill of compassion and the skill of empathy, and all that wasn't there back then either. And so that alone is just, makes it night and day, right? But I think the really important and key way in which mindfulness has changed everything for me is in the way that I see my experience, right? And what I mean by that is that in the past, I looked at my life as a series of sort of not connected or disconnected experiences between which were just my thoughts and like the sort of getting lost in whatever was going on in my mind, right? Now, for me, a lot of that came in the form of worry, right? I was always worried about stuff. I was always worried that, when I was back in the day in my big career in my life, right? I was working on commission in the advertising industry, right? And I'm talking like Mad Men advertising, right? Like the big corporate kind of stuff. And I remember just every single day feeling like, one of my clients is going to pull a job, or I'm not going to get the job that they promised me, and I'm going to lose my, income, and so on and so forth. And that was almost like a constant, and that, among other things, was a constant, just a sort of dialogue going on in my mind, constantly. And that dialogue was only broken up by, oh, I'm in a meeting now. And now I have to be present. I have to do this meeting. And as soon as I leave, now there the story starts again. Boom, 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 boom. Right? And again, what that felt like, it gave this impression, this sort of first-person impression, if you will, of a life that was not a continuous experience, right? It was a series of experiences that were broken up, and again, just separated by this sort of, wild and intense rumination, right? Pardon me, I just had a little tickle in my throat there. I had to take a sip of water. And so what would happen is, and again, this went on, it felt like 24 hours a day, right? It felt like when I was at night, even like while I was watching TV shows, I would be, kind of, in the background, there would be this, this chatter going on, right? And so it was almost like the chatter was the only thing I was ever experiencing, right? Again, unless I had to be, in a certain thing, right? And that's, I think, one of the reasons why hockey was so wonderful for me, and I loved hockey so much, is because when you're on the ice, you can't be thinking about anything else, right? It's like it forces you to be really present in a very, exciting way, right? You're getting your heart rate up and your blood pressure and everything's like, excited, but you got to be present. You got to be focused. Otherwise, you're going to play like terribly, and your friends aren't going to want you to be on the team anymore, right? So it was almost like a forced presence, right? And that's the thing about mindfulness, right? When we practice mindfulness, we develop this skill of not just realizing, but of attending to our experience moment by moment. Which is to say that the day no longer is the 10 o'clock meeting, the 12 o'clock meeting, the 2 o'clock meeting, the 4 o'clock meeting, the 6 o'clock meeting, and then nothing in between those, right? It's a moment by moment arising experience, right? That's what mindfulness teaches us, right? And again, it's really tricky with mindfulness, right? Like, because I could just tell you that, right? I just did tell you that. And you, I'm sure, understand. I'm going to elaborate on my meaning here so that you understand it, cognitively, even more deeply, even more clearly, right? But that's not the experience, right? There's an old saying that says the map is not the territory. And I think that really applies to this, what we're talking about with mindfulness, right? Because I can tell you that your experience is, constantly, since the moment you were born and for your entire lifespan, your experience is unfolding in this magical time that we call now. And nothing else, right? That's it. That's the entirety of our experience. Now, everything that happens to us happens in this now, right? And so I can tell you that. I can explain that to you. I can even write a book about it and have you read it 5 times and read the Cliff Notes too. And you'll understand it, right? There's no question. This is not complicated. It's not hard to understand this concept. But as I always tell my clients, right, that when I start working with a new client, right, they are starting the practice of mindfulness, right? But what I remind everyone, usually in the very first meeting that I have with them, is that it's not that they're starting this practice now, but it's not to say that they're starting practice now, because they've been practicing something. You have been practicing something. I had been practicing something our whole lives. Every time you get into that, or every time I would get into that space of just, thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking, what's going to go wrong? What's going to go wrong? What are the pressures? What do I need to do? Stress. I'm practicing that, right? I'm teaching my body and my nervous system, my brain to do that. And guess what? Our brains and our nervous systems are really good at learning new things and really good at developing new habits, even if those habits are detrimental to our well-being, which of course this one was, right? But let's take a look more deeply into the process that I'm talking about, right? So what was happening there, and again, I'm giving a pretty silly example. I mean, I'm painting it with a very contrast and a very stark look at it. It's probably not quite as severe as I'm explaining it, but it feels that way looking back on it. You know what I mean? Anyway, so in the example that I'm giving you, right, I was what we might call living in my thoughts, right? Which is to say that every time that something wasn't happening where I was not required to interact with somebody, and that could be either a work meeting, it could be ordering a slice of pizza, it could be telling a cab driver where I need to go, it could be a phone call, all these things would break up the chatter, right? But it's like the chatter was always there to step back in whenever that experience was over, right? And that's exactly the thing. I just said it right there. That experience was over. That is the confusion right there, okay? Because our experience is everything that's happening moment by moment. It's not like, okay, I just got out of a cab. That was an experience. Now when's the next experience going to happen? No, getting out of the cab is an experience, right? Stepping one foot in front of the other, breathing the air, feeling the sunshine on my skin. These are experiences. It's all an experience. It's all a continuous moment by moment experience. And when I say that mindfulness teaches us this, what I mean is that when we practice mindfulness, what we're doing is we're practicing bringing awareness to our moment by moment experience. And remember, that word awareness is the key, okay? Because here's how it really works, okay? And this is something, if I was going to do a TED Talk, right, this would be it, okay? Every single nanosecond that you've ever been alive, you have been having an experience that exists in 3 realms. And again, it's not, broken up. It's continuous. It's a continuous moment by moment experience that we experience in 3 realms. Okay, those 3 realms are the body, right? We're always having an experience of our body. Breathing, right? We can always sense into our bodies. We are always, we might be getting warm and perspiring. We might be feeling cold and want to, button up our jacket, right? We might feel hungry. We might feel satiated. We might feel excited. We might feel aroused. We might feel horny. We might feel whatever it is, right? That is a body experience, and it is never not happening. Never. It's constantly over and over and over. I shouldn't even use that word over and over. It's just there 100% of the time that your body is experiencing this moment, right? The second sort of sphere, I had to fill my fountain pen this morning. I got a little ink on my finger. The second sphere of our experience is the emotions. And moment by moment, you are experiencing emotions. Now, sometimes those emotions feel neutral, right? And that's technically a name of an emotion, neutral emotion, right? Where it feels like there's no emotion, but that's not really what it is, right? It's just there's a flatness to it. There's a sort of calm to the emotion, if you will. Right. But you can always find, like, if you, even in those moments where you feel the neutral emotion, if you really inquire, you can get a sense of, okay, was it a neutral, but does it feel positive neutral or negative neutral? Because it's never completely void. Okay, and if we look in, although I will caution you that the emotions are one of the hardest experiences to discern in this context, okay? But if we train ourselves, and this is the point, that as we practice looking in and naming our emotions over and over and over, we become really good at sensing those really little subtle emotions that are happening all the time, moment by moment, okay? Now this third sphere of our moment by moment experience, the third way in which we are always constantly experiencing life, is in the thoughts. And that is to say, not just, the thoughts sounds a little abstract, right? Like we're always having thoughts, right? That feels like, okay, what is it? Okay, yeah, sure. Got it. Okay, fine. Mr. Scientist, right? But what we're really talking about when we say the experience of the thoughts, or at least maybe the predominant way that we're talking about, is in that sort of mental chatter. Okay, that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is the narrative of our life. Some people even call it a dialogue, right? For me, that's how it felt all the time. I felt like I was having a conversation with myself constantly, all the time. Right? Oh, is that client going to take the job away? I haven't heard back from her in 3 days, and that would be the literal words going through my mind, right? And so that is an experience of thought, right? But now, even if you don't have the chatter going, right? Every moment, like every time when I look at that plant that's, I could look at the one in the background or the one that you can't see, which is this cute little baby. I just have to show you real quick. Look at that little baby. She's unfurling a couple of new leaves here. I planted this just as this one little leaf about, close to a year ago. And it's already, so anyway, I look at that and I have thoughts about it, right? And so that is also the way in which we experience thoughts, right? But for most of us, The really impactful way is more like that, that chatter, right? Don't do that. Do that. You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have said that. Oh my gosh, everybody thinks you're, silly, or oh my gosh, they all like you. They're laughing, and oh my gosh, wouldn't you love to have some pizza right now? Right? Like that's how the thoughts are sort of manifesting themselves, right? But even if that's not happening, as I say, just looking at a plant, I'm processing it with my thoughts. Right. So the thought realm sort of has this, duality to it, if you will. Okay. Now, here's the thing. When we say that we are having that, when we use the word awareness, right? I can be aware of my body at any given moment, right? In any part of my body, right? For instance, my feet, right? Like, and you right now sitting here listening to this podcast, feel your feet right now, right? We can all do it. We can all sense like, okay, yeah, there's my feet. Quite frankly, feels like I'm getting a little sweaty in my feet, which is maybe a little gross, because I'm sitting here getting excited and talking and having a little caffeine, waking up on my Monday morning, right? But, maybe there's times where the feet just feel they're just there, it's neutral, right? And so a lot of times you might be like, well, I don't feel my feet, right? I can't feel my feet. And that's just not true, right? Because at the end of the day, when our feet are tired from walking all day, well, you feel your feet just plenty then, don't you? You feel the throbbing, you feel the aching, you feel like, oh my gosh. And then the thought is, I just want to sit down and put my feet up and relax, right? And then the emotion is something like, maybe a little grief at how much my feet hurt, right? We could examine that further. I'm not going to do that here, but the point is, though, that you can see how these three aspects of my experience are always there. Even though I'm not always conscious of the way my feet feel, I am always able to feel my feet. And it could be argued that I always do feel my feet. It's just a question of awareness, right? And as we practice mindfulness, really what we're doing, and especially if you work with me, because I work in more of the informal version of mindfulness, right? Like meditation equals mindfulness, or mindfulness equals meditation, right? So any way in which we're paying attention is a form of meditation, right? But we can talk about formal meditation, in which we close our eyes, we sit in a certain position, and we, do the paying attention to the breath. Every time the mind wanders, we bring it back, right? That's formal meditation. And I do teach that, and that's an important part of it. But for me, and for the sort of way that my whole, life has worked out, and the way that I, help people, is to practice informally, just moment by moment, feeling into the feet, that kind of stuff, right? And so as we do these practices and we cultivate this deeper, more full, and more clear awareness of our body, which includes our feet, our butt, our, every part of our body, right? Our emotions and the thoughts, again, thoughts meaning mostly that chatter, right? But also just in general thoughts, right? As we cultivate this again, the skill, as we practice paying attention to these three aspects of our experience, we cultivate the skill of awareness. And what that means is that, as we're going through our life, right, as we're experiencing whatever is arising in this present moment, in this now, because I don't even like to use the word present moment. The moment sounds like one thing, almost like a second. That's not what now is. Now is eternal, and it's always now, no matter what. Always. There's never been a time in your life where it wasn't now. Okay? So, and anything, as Eckhart Tolle says, nothing ever happens in the future and nothing has ever happened in the past. Because everything you've ever experienced, you have experienced now. And there's no other way to look at that, right? Except, I guess, people who do astral projection and stuff like that, I suppose that's an outlier, okay? But back to my point is that as we cultivate our awareness, right, or as we cultivate the skill of awareness through practicing, and practicing just means checking in, right? And as we start out doing it like 4 or 5 times a day, just for a few, 30 seconds to a minute or something, 4 or 5 times a day, and you start to understand, you start to get an overall, it starts to become automatic, that I don't have to just sit here and think like, oh man, what do my feet feel like? I feel my feet. I feel my feet all the time now. Just like I feel my chest all the time. I feel all of my body all the time now. Now, it's not like I have to focus on that, right? It's not like, oh, no, don't talk to me, I'm feeling my body, right? But it's almost like a peripheral sense, right? Just like as I'm staring into this camera right now and talking to you through this microphone, I can see the plant behind the screen, and I can see it up there. I'm not looking at it, but I can see it. And because I'm so familiar with that plant, I know exactly what it is, right? Now, if it was something that was never there before, well, then I would have to turn and look and see what is that thing, right? And so that's what happens with our experiences, right? When something, like when a pain arises, for instance, right? Well, now I'm going to turn to that pain. I'm going to say, wait, what is going on here? What is this tension in my chest that I'm feeling? What is this tension in my throat? What is the tension around my facial muscles? I can feel this. That must mean that I'm nervous about something. I must be feeling some kind of, some emotion of fear of some kind. And if I'm feeling the emotion of fear of some kind, well, then my thoughts must be connected to that. What story am I telling myself right now? And you see, this is the way that we can see that not only are these 3 realms of our experience, 3 separate things, 3 separate ways in which we experience our lives moment by moment from birth till death, but also that there is a causal cycle that goes on with them, okay? Meaning that as I call my attention to because let's understand real quick the difference between attention and awareness, right? Awareness is feeling like, again, that peripheral sort of sense, like, wow, I can feel this tension. Well, now I attend to that tension. I pay attention to that tension in my chest or in my face or in my throat. And those are the 3 areas where we generally tend to feel tension, right? So I know I've been using the feet because it's just, I wanted to just show you that it's anything, right? It can be my fingers, it could be my toes, it could be anything, right? But generally speaking, we're going to feel it, we're going to feel our chest and that's where we feel the emotions, right? And now again, the emotions are causing that feeling. And the thing that is causing the emotion is the thoughts, right? Because I'm just walking down Madison Avenue with my, envelope full of proofs to show my client. There's no reality that's saying, oh, you're going to lose that job. She's going to pull the job from you, even though she said you were going to get that job, right? There's nothing that made that happen. It was just the thoughts that were going on in my mind, completely detached from any reality. But the thoughts create the emotion of fear. And then the emotion of fear creates that tension in our body. And then that tension in our body, and this we know through neuroscience now. I mean, the Buddha said this, 2,500 years ago, right? But we know through neuroscience now, through the study of the vagus nerve and through all kinds of wonderful work done by Dan Siegel, by Stephen Porges, by Bessel van der Kolk, by Richard Davidson, by Daniel Goldman, all of these wonderful scientists who have done this work to show us that the way our body feels is going to impact the thought that arises, right? So again, I was practicing feeling tense all the time. I was practicing feeling emotions of fear because I was practicing telling myself this story. And again, it's a cycle. So we could start with the thoughts, or we could start with the body, or we could start with the emotions. But either way, it was a practice, and it just became the automatic way in which my life was happening. But now I realize that if I'm having these negative thoughts about something, well, I can challenge them. I can say, okay, are these negative thoughts happening because you're feeling this tension in your body? And the tension could just be coming from too much caffeine, you know? And then all of a sudden I'm experiencing anxiety. Now, you've heard of that, I'm sure, right? This is something that people are talking about a lot nowadays on like TikTok and Facebook and stuff like that, you have coffee is supposed to wake me up, but it just winds up making me feel anxious, right? Well, that's what that is, right? The tension in the body is creating a certain brand or flavor of thoughts, and they're going to be worrisome thoughts. No matter what, you'll find something. Your brain will find something to be worried about, trust me. And then you're experiencing the emotion of fear. And then the emotion of fear is creating that feeling of anxiety, and then that is promoting the thoughts again. So if we find ourselves, and mindfulness, the skill of mindfulness is noticing that, right? It's having the awareness of this. It's not just that this is happening in the background in between your experiences, right? This is the experience, right? This is what's going on. And that's when I realized that, wait a minute, I'm having two different experiences right now, right? But anyway, getting back to my first thought before I get to that. So if I find this happening in my awareness, that wow, I'm feeling this tension and I've got this, this really negative feeling about me right now. Well, what if I change one of these things? What if I change one of the 3 points in this cycle? So I can do something physically, right? I can have a glass of water. I can go for a walk. I can do some stretching, maybe a workout, right? What if it's thoughts, right? I can practice gratitude. I can practice generosity. And this is going to change the makeup of the emotions. Richie Davidson tells us, a world-renowned neuroscientist tells us just a couple of years ago that the most effective way to activate the circuits of the brain associated with positive emotions is through generosity. So if I go and I do something for someone and I practice generosity, now all of a sudden the entire thing starts to shift, right? Or if I work on the emotions, I could just, pop on a YouTube video of like a stand-up comic and just get laughy, get giggly for a little while. And then the whole thing changes because it's a cyclical process, right? So anyway, we're like almost out of time here. I don't like to go over 30 minutes because I don't know, I wouldn't listen to me for more than 30 minutes. So I think we'll make a part 2 of this episode, because again, as I said, this wasn't really the TED Talk that I expected to be. But I think tomorrow what I'll do is, the next time I do an episode, I'll get into sort of the nuts and bolts and how this is all working in a more sort of fundamental way, right? But I'm going to leave you with this thought. Okay, that as I mentioned a few moments ago, right? Back in the day, back in 1998 or whatever, right, when I'm walking down Madison Avenue with the proofs under my arm and thinking that this person's gonna just ruin my whole career, right? In that moment, I'm actually having 2 different experiences. And that's also what mindfulness teaches us, because we practice it. It's not just learning it like you do in a book. It's practicing the direct experience. We start to recognize that, wait a second, I'm having the physical experience of just walking down the street on this beautiful day, but my thoughts are not focused on what's happening right now. My thoughts are bringing me out of the present moment. My thoughts are bringing me into this time warp of, oh my gosh, what's going to happen when I get to this meeting and this person tells me that my career's over, right? Which was, of course, overblown and never really going to happen, right? But the point is that, and again, this is one of the skills that we derive from these practices, is that we recognize that no, my experience right now is just walking down the street. So let me pay attention to my body as I'm walking down the street. Let me pay attention to what's going on in my mind. And if there's some kind of weird chatter going on, well, then just bring my attention back to walking, back to the feeling of my feet taking steps down Madison Avenue, right? And then recognizing that I'm having emotions right now. And that is my experience right now until something pops up, or until I am no longer walking on Madison Avenue, but now I'm saying hello to a security guard. And now I'm no longer saying hello to a security guard, but I'm walking into an elevator. I'm feeling the air conditioning. I'm hearing the different sounds. I'm feeling the emotion maybe of excitement or fear, or whatever it is. But again, what are my thoughts now? And the skill also includes, and this I'm going to end today, the skill includes the ability to say what I'm paying attention to. And that's the key. Because that is where, it is when we're having these two different experiences, right, that stress comes in. Right? Because again, I'm just walking down the street and walking into an elevator saying I'm a security guard. There's nothing that's happening that's showing me that there's a reason to be afraid. But my thoughts are creating this wild story that are creating the fear. And the only way my body knows how to respond to that is with tension and stress, high blood pressure, elevated heart rate, all kinds of stuff that's not good for me. It's not good for me right now. It's not good for my relationships. It's not good for my kids when I get home. It's not healthy for anyone. And we can build these skills less than 20 minutes a day, folks. Less than 20 minutes a day. So if you want to know more before my next TED Talk, you reach out, art@artburnscoaching.com. All right? Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for watching if you're watching on video. And please like, share, subscribe, do all the things, help me out with the algorithm. And yeah, let me know if there's anything you want me to ever talk about, or if something I've said here, you have a question about, or, send it in, and I would love to respond to that with an episode. Okay. I did that on TikTok for a long time, and it was really, really awesome. By the way, I'm thinking about getting back into TikTok too, for all of you TikTokers, at least until our government tells us we can't do it anymore. We'll see what happens there. Anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I wish you well, and I will be back very soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.